Barbara, I think you're okay to start.
Okay, thanks, Donna. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you. Before we start, please know that this event is being recorded. Today's event is made possible by our presenting sponsors, Torrance Area Chamber of Commerce and Torrance Refining Company, and our supporting sponsor, California Water Service. We're excited about today's topic, a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we have an exciting speaker. Farzana Nayani is recognized. She's a specialist in diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a business and strategy coach and international keynote speaker, she is sought after for her expertise and training on intercultural communication, supplier diversity, employee engagement, and diversity and inclusion by Fortune 500 corporations, educational institutions, and nonprofits alike. Farzana's advisory work with employee resource groups, small business advocacy and entrepreneurship, and racial equity and inclusion has taken her to engagements across our nation, from the White House to Silicon Valley, and her expertise has been featured in nationally acclaimed media outlets and publications. Her book, Raising Multiracial Children, Tools for Nurturing Identity in a Racialized World, is in demand, and everyone who remains throughout the end of today's event will be entered into a drawing to win a copy of this book. I'm excited and looking forward to her new book coming out this spring, The Power of Employee Resource Groups, How People Create Authentic Change. In the next 40 minutes, Farzana will share why we have a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we as business leaders can develop a culture of belonging within our organizations where everyone can thrive. It's my pleasure to welcome Farzana Nayani.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Barbara. A special thanks to Donna and the team, Jonisha, Barbara, and the entire chamber for having me today. It's so special to be here today. As a South Bay resident and someone who's passionate about business and diversity, equity, and inclusion, what you're doing here today is so valuable and so needed. We will be diving into some concepts today. I'll be sharing screen, and this meeting will be recorded. So, spread the word with fellow chamber members and friends. As we begin, I want to honor the indigenous lands we're on. We're on the lands of the Tongva people. It's important to honor the lands we're on, to acknowledge the punctuated history, and to offer gratitude to the first peoples of this land. If you want to look up what lands you're on, wherever you are in the country, you can look at the website native-land.ca and be able to do that. So let's go ahead and get started. So as we begin, the topic today is a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the next time we speak, we'll also have a roundtable. So I'm excited to tee that up as we continue to the conversation today. As was mentioned, my name is Farzana. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm an author of these two books. The next one coming out is The Power of Employee Resource Groups. It comes out in May. So some of you may have employee resource groups at your organization. I also have worked with a number of different companies and organizations, nonprofits. And as we continue today, I'll draw from actually hearing from these different groups and companies, the best practices that we hear, and also pitfalls to avoid as you continue in your journey of DEI. The different elements of what I do in terms of business coaching, training, and curriculum design is what I'll be highlighting here today in terms of what can help advise you. If you are a small business or a major corporation, it all applies. And as a certified business, small business enterprise and women and minority-owned business, I feel passionate about small business as well. So I really feel like I'm in the trenches with you all as well, for those of you who are small businesses. So let's go ahead and get started. What is the need or the importance of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion with business? Well, the main thing is currently the impact of the current times is really rocking the environments that we have at our organizations, with the Great Resignation, with the pandemic, with the context of the current times, with the racial reckoning, and also the need for more inclusion, equity, and accessibility. This is such a powerful time to examine DEI at your organization. It's really important to connect to the public and the community in terms of any type of conversation around this. We've seen how social media has taken hold and how we have to pay attention to our audiences and our customers and our members in order to support and engage with them. Our employees are also in need of engagement and support. And all of this actually leads to how we can maximize productivity of our businesses. And as we continue today, I really would like to invite you to drop in to think about what is important to you. Are all of these things, current for you? Are there a couple that stand out? And if you think about the needs in your business today, you'll come up with some questions you may have. We have Q&A at the end. I also will be taking some as we go along, so I'll keep an eye on the chat. So feel free to put some information in the chat or questions as we go along as well. Also, if you have something kind of private that you want to direct message me, feel free to do that and I'll surface it without mentioning your name. So that's another thing we can do today because I know this is a sensitive topic. So let's start off with, what is diversity, equity, and inclusion? And it's good to have a level set. Everyone in here has a different experience with DEI and maybe different understandings. So as we look at what diversity means, diversity is the range of human differences. It's not limited to race, class, and gender identity, but it includes that as well as sexual orientation, nationality, ethnicity, age, right, ability, body size, immigrant status. You can add so many things to the concept of diversity. When we stick to just thinking about race and age or gender and class, it really limits the ideas that we have here around how those diversity dimensions intersect, how there are different parts of that can come together and layer into the discussions we have. So as we're looking at one thing or the other, that's important, but also think about how these things actually combine. Inclusion is the involvement and empowerment of people. It's recognizing worth and dignity of all people, how we respect each other, how we incorporate the ways that people live and are, and the backgrounds of people so that there can be true belonging. You may see the acronym DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and B stands for belonging. And that's really important because if you're invited to, participate, do you really feel included? Do you really feel like you belong? And that is what organizations are striving to do today. The next concept is equity, and equity in business, as we know, is more economic, but equity in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion relates to how we can create an equitable environment. It's when a person's social, personal backgrounds are not an obstacle to achieving their maximum level of access and potential for success. So if you think about, let's say there's a building and there's a door to the building, and you say, well, we're open to everybody, right? This door is, and this event and this experience is open to everybody. Well, that's great. But what if people can't get to the door, right? What if there are stairs there and there isn't a ramp for someone who uses a wheelchair? What if some people don't know the directions to get to the door? So where companies get caught is when we treat people, quote, equally, but don't have equitable access or equity in how those resources, those experiences, those career opportunities are shared. And that is why the term inequity is very prominent these days, because sometimes when we look at fairness across the board, or we think about treating people equally, it actually creates an imbalance. Does that make sense? So equity is the venture into how we can create systems, processes, policies, experiences where people can all thrive. And when you think about you, and you think about your company vision, here's where we can really start to dive in. The question to you is this: what is your overarching goal that you wish to achieve? with diversity, equity, and inclusion? And is that inclusive of creating impact in the community? Is it to be a better partner to social causes? Is it to create a better work environment for your staff? What is your goal? Is it to attract and retain top talent? Is it to build a better product? Because if we're not observant of differences, we could actually create products that are not helpful. When we look at these, go ahead and put in the chat what your overarching goal is, or a couple that you wish to achieve, and let's take a look. Just to give an example of building a better product, there was a company that created a sign-up sheet for one of their services, a form online. And the programmers of that form made it so you had to put in 3 characters into that form in order to sign up, because they wanted to stop spammers and trolls and robots. But what happened was this disproportionately affected the Asian community, because there are a lot of names in the Asian community like Lee, L-I, or U, Y-U, right, that have short names. So what happened was this entire audience of people could not sign up for their services. This is how having a diverse slate of engineers or people even to test the product or service out can be helpful. As we think about even being a partner to social causes, there are a lot of social causes that are prominent right now. How do you make the call on that? How do you put out a statement? I've had a lot of requests from companies. Farzana, can you help us with a statement, a public statement on, you know, the tragedies currently happening in our nation? How do we navigate that? That is a challenge, absolutely. And at the same time, if you have a company vision, what can happen is this can help guide you through that. So we have some really great comments coming in the chat around what your overarching goals are. We have here listening and understanding the needs of the community that we serve. So if you're a foundation, if you're an organization that is community-based or want to connect with community, that's great. We have here attracting and retaining top talent and better partnership in the community. Absolutely. Better serving all of your patients, creating a positive impact in the community, and a better work environment. These are great. I also got a direct message seeking to create a better work environment for current and future employees. These are all beautiful, inspirational goals. And then we get into how do you do that? A big key to, first of all, fostering an inclusive environment is listening. Making sure that you have a setup where people can give you feedback without repercussion, without any sense of that they're complaining. You know, I've always been taught that feedback is a gift. We had a company, I work a lot with publishing companies as well. We had a company that put a book out and people critiqued the name of the book. It was a little bit of sarcasm in the book, but it could probably be taken the wrong way by certain communities. And the feedback by the staff was pretty difficult to hear. And so the company leadership were upset about this. And they said, you know, our employees are really upset. And what I had to say to them was, feedback is a gift. Because the last thing you want to do is to have that product go out into the public and have that type of experience from the public. Your employees are your best litmus test, rubric for gauge, right, for what is going on in the world. So we absolutely have to listen. I love these goals that are coming in. Keep them coming as we continue. I want to walk you through the key targets of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this framework is something that you can take with you and apply to any industry, any type of business, and any level of business. If you're the leader in the business, if you're the owner, if you're the founder, if you're a department head, if you're simply, you know, someone who is involved with your day-to-day job, These are all areas that can support your overarching goals. And the key here is the impact that you wish to create. So the first idea here is to start with your goal, your target. When you think about your focus, a lot of the time we have trouble actually identifying what that is. And it's important to pause and ask your leadership, your fellow colleagues, what are our goals? So go through a similar exercise. Is it retention of staff? Is it attracting some new employees that can really support the culture and the environment? And that actually leads us to the first one. So on the right here, workplace culture and environment. Perhaps you want to create a place where, let's say you have a lot of working parents and they're strained right now with the pandemic and childcare, and you want to make sure that there is a place for people to really feel welcome. Well, you could take a look at, I don't know, maybe a flexible work schedule, or you could take a look at the benefits you offer. And this can be a way to support people through looking at how that environment is a place where people feel comfortable, feel that they can be supported. Maybe it's language. So you notice that I shared my pronouns, my gender pronouns, and there could be someone on your team who is trans or gender non-binary. And maybe there can be some awareness around using the pronouns they and them, for example. So how do you incorporate some of that learning into your environment? And be proactive about it and do it in such a way where there's respect, integrity, awareness, mindfulness, etc. So you'll run into that not only with employees, but with your customers, with the public, as you engage further. That leads us to the next target area, which is communications and branding. You know, whenever I help support DEI initiatives with organizations, this is something that creeps up that is a big part of what you do. The reason is because anytime you do a policy or process change or an initiative or donate to a social cause or whatever it is, the communications around it are key, right? You know, they say if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear, right? Does it happen? You know, the philosophy is, if you're doing amazing work, how do you share about it? Now, if you're struggling, how also do you share about that journey and that process? So communications and branding around your company is key. Also, thinking about the different communities that you serve and how they may take a message or not. So I really want to highlight that one because sometimes we get caught not paying attention to that one, and it's so important. It actually is related to the next one, which is potential new growth markets. And if you think about how communities are being served these days, there is such tremendous growth in different markets. So let's take Mattel for an example. Mattel is near where I live, and they have they've done such a tremendous job diversifying the different dolls, the Barbies that they have. You know, they had one for Naomi Osaka recently. They've got ones with women in STEM. So you see researchers, you see scientists, and you see different career paths. And what this does is, it's a couple things. One, it disrupts the narrative around, for example, some communities being a part of these careers, which is such a great cause for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Absolutely. Athletes, all these careers. But secondly, it also speaks to a market that has been there for a while that hasn't been served. And if you can think about it as a new growth market, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? So when you focus on yourselves, on your own businesses, how can that actually be a topic of conversation? What is a new growth market for you? And don't be scared about it. Look at it and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we have overlooked this community and we could do better. Maybe we need to translate our materials into other languages, Spanish, for example, right? Maybe we need to have different faces on our materials so that it speaks to the communities we want to serve. All of those things, as you can see, are tied together, right? Because if you have a workplace, work culture that's inclusive of that, and you communicate, it'll hit the new market. So it's so interconnected. That's why we have this as a web, spokes on a wheel. Product design and service delivery is so key. I gave you the example of that online form that inadvertently excluded people. There's also ways that things can be delivered that could be more inclusive, and products design. So you may have seen those, you may have heard of this example, but those hand soap, those electronic hand soap dispensers where you put your hand under and then they dispense soap. The issue with them was that for people who had darker skin, it didn't actually read the skin and it wouldn't dispense. Now that's a problem, right? And what was the breakdown? The breakdown was the design, the breakdown was the testing, the breakdown was in how all of that was created. And absolutely, it's related to who's on the team, who they thought of with the growth markets or the current market. And I invite you to think about your products and your services. And the key is you kind of take a person, any type of archetype or persona, and run them through your system. Run them through. And you see, look at where people can get caught, right? Okay, someone who maybe isn't tall enough, can't reach the top shelf in our store. And our merchandising is geared to have whatever on the top. Some of these things already, but what can happen is it can be an equity issue. I remember an office that had built a break room, and there was someone with a wheelchair and they couldn't reach the microwave. And so they did a reno, and it's sort of like to add salt to the wound. When they did the reno, they put the microwave low, but they made it too low. So then the person almost had to fall out in order to go and use the microwave. So our efforts, right? I want to acknowledge there's a lot of pain around it because we try. There's a lot of good intentions, but we've got to get it right. And again, to come back to the original statement I said when we came in today, was the best way to do it is to listen. The best way to do it is to ask your constituents and to foster conversation. And when mistakes do happen, because they will, it's not an if, it's a when they happen, how do you recover? How do you actually, thrive? You know how they say fail fast, fail quickly and recover quickly. I was able to tour Facebook's headquarters, and they had this big banner near one of their desks, and it says failure is an option. Failure is an option because we learn from it, but the thing that we need to do is recover and have grace, right? Have that sense of learning from it. The last thing here has to do with HR, recruiting, hiring, and promotions. And believe it or not, that's usually the first thing people look at. The first thing people look at is how we hire and recruit to hit diverse communities. But as you can see, it's one component of many, many components. So I want to pause here and see if there are any questions. I'm taking a peek at the chat here. Love the concepts that are coming in. We have the supporting employment support for people with special needs. Absolutely. This is great. And thinking about there are issues. I've got a DM about people in schools, students in schools. Absolutely. This can apply to school districts. This can apply to any type of organization, any institution of higher learning. And we have here a comment that the breakdown in process is always who's seated at the table. Now, absolutely, if you have a diverse team, that can help alleviate some of this. The other thing is if you have a diverse mindset, a concept in your mind where you need to think about people beyond who is present, that's always a way to also incorporate inclusion. But I love these comments coming in. Thank you very much. So let's get to you. Okay. What are some resources and challenges that you have as business leaders, as people who interact with colleagues? Leadership and key stakeholders are key here. They're a resource for you. They can help support you. They can guide you. And at the same time, it can be challenging. I was working with a board. It was an organization supporting youth. And the board was, a great board. However, when the topic around racial equity came up, they were a little nervous about it. And so some of the leaders on the board said, you know what, if we just do our fundraiser for all youth, it'll cover, right, everybody. It'll cover our Black students, it'll cover, right, Black, Indigenous people of color, and our LGBTQ plus community students and youth. And that's fine. However, there's a disproportionate high level of youth and teens who are facing depression, mental health issues, who are from the Black community, for example, right? So sometimes in our efforts to, right, again, be equal to all, we're missing the opportunity. So we had to have a level set with that board. So what I'm saying is that your key stakeholders can be, again, a resource, or it can be challenging in how you navigate this. This might resonate with you. You might know of a person on your team who sounds like what I just described. Again, it comes from a place of positivity, right? Best intention, but how do we navigate that? Resources for you are your existing programs, events, and projects, and also ones that are already out there in the community. They also can be something that could be an opportunity for you to put together. And it's very exciting to think about some initiatives you can set forward. So as we're thinking about it today, you can think about what goal do you have after today of what you can put in place. The third one is resistance, which I spoke to a little bit, but there's also public pressure. The public pressure can be from social media, right? It can be from maybe something gets in the newspaper, and then you have to react to it and be responsive. It's difficult. I really empathize with leaders today who are navigating all of this. And, news travels fast, good news and bad news. So I've seen things where, maybe there's a tiny misstep. So do you have a team that can, react to that as it happens? What's great also is momentum and motivation from staff and customers. That is, there's a lot of eagerness around this. There's also a lot of, momentum, motivation. We also want to be careful not to burn out folks. And, to be mindful of, by the way, this is a journey. It's not a sprint. It's a long road. And the key is to take a step at a time. Now, what I've put together here for you is something that I use with clients, and you can get this for free. You can just sign up and you can download it. It's called the DEI Asset Inventory. And what this does, and we'll drop the link in the chat. What this does is it's just a one pager, and it's basically an audit. You just kind of go through and fill it in, and you say, okay, I've got this. I need this. Here's an area that I can work on. So that's my gift to you. If you need support on that, let me know. But you can actually take that back to your team and work through it with your colleagues and your fellow leaders. And what I found is that that's a great way to crack open the conversation if you haven't done it already, or if you're already way further along in this, you can do an assessment of yourself. So you can go ahead and do that. Another thing to think about is how you're supporting your leaders. How do you support your team? And I have to call in that in this current time, we need to be mindful of the burden on employees from underrepresented groups, right? And you may have heard me use the term BIPOC. That term stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. And it's used to acknowledge the specific experiences that Black and Indigenous people face, and also as people of color in general, what people also experience. So when you see that now, you know what that means, in case you're wondering. In Canada, they reverse it. They say IBPOC. There's a lot of Indigenous, work to be done there, okay? And what we need to do as we support our leaders, again, is to invite input, listen deeply, and ask questions. What support do you need? What is important? What is necessary? What are we missing, and what can we do better? And, at the same time, the rest of us who may not be experiencing some things that, I'll give an example that there's a huge uptick in anti-Asian racism right now. Huge uptick due to people talking about the coronavirus as kung flu, and it's terrible, and it's affecting schools. Kids are being bullied about it. So there's some resources that are needed and support for the community. Now, if a community is going through that, absolutely, it's important to listen to them. But there's another word I want you to think about, and that term is allyship. Being an ally means standing up for someone. Of course, you want to incorporate what the needs are of the people and hear from them. But I think it was the 2021 word of the year in the dictionary, allyship. And how that's done is if you have other groups, if you have employee research groups, or if you have other leaders who can, start to put forward support for different communities that are in need, that is how we can support each other. So that's the recipe in a nutshell of how to look at DEI as a whole in your organization with all the spokes in the wheel, and then being mindful of those who are underrepresented or are experiencing what's going on in the world. And, what I want to leave with you here are steps in DEI strategy. So how do you begin? You may be wondering, where do you start? And the first thing you do is you take data that you may have, or start to think about what data you can acquire. And usually what you could do is start off with a survey. You start off with maybe a pulse survey, an employee engagement survey, that's what they're called. That is one thing you can do. And just have a benchmark. Another thing you can do is just look at your numbers, right? Of, who's utilizing your services, the demographics of people who are either at your company or who you serve, and take a look at all of that and just get broad brush stroke. And you'll get clues from that. You'll get clues from listening to people, from the surveys, from even surveying your customers. From there, that's where you create your plan. You create your plan from what the needs are and what your goals are. It may seem very elementary to think of, well, of course I would make a plan. But I want to caution us because a lot of the time with DEI, people react. Are you seeing this in the public? We react. And when you don't have a plan and you're reacting only, it's very stressful and it can actually create tension for you and decisions you have to make as leaders. So when you have your plan, anything that comes in from what's going on in the world, or maybe something happens with your employees, that plan will hold you through that because you have that vision. Connecting with people is so important. It's key. Asking each other, talking to one another. This is not a project you can do alone. It's not something you can champion, just you waving the flag at your company. You've got to get, your colleagues on board, allies, champions. You've got to have, a company byline that communicates to your employees that this is important. And the next part is how it connects to the business. For people who admittedly don't care about any of this, because there is that. There are people who think, this isn't actually connected to what I do. We have to be real about that exists. And in my upcoming book, The Power of Employee Research Groups, I talk about how there are people who are resistors to this, or there are people who are latent allies who, if you kind of give them something, they'll wake up and get on board. Or maybe that's you. Maybe you're nervous and you don't want to touch any of this stuff. I'm speaking to everyone there, all of these groups, all of these types of people, because the way to support this is to look at how this actually connects to the business. It affects the business. I give you a ton of examples. You can probably think of more. You've probably seen them in the news, right? And when you understand that investment, determining your budget for this will be, it'll make more sense. It'll be a lot easier when you can see, we're leaking here. We're leaking staff. We're leaking customers. We're losing people, right? That is how to get it all wrapped together. Now, in my heart of hearts, I wish people did this because, we just want to, it's the right thing to do. But sometimes the way to do it, it's got to make sense. You can't just do everything. I see the hand and I'm going to take it after this. So thank you. As we wrap up the steps in DEI strategy, my favorite part of all of this is the last part. It's the feedback loop. Your feedback loop is so key. It's acknowledging your successes, celebrating those wins, and then thinking about how you can develop. And then the cycle starts again. Then in a year, you take another poll, you do another gauge, you have another town hall. And this is it as a living organism. It should live and breathe in your framework of how you do business. It should be a part that's integrated. It's not something that's bolted on or tacked on or glued on or, like push pinned in to your business. A little sticky that's kind of like pushed on there for a minute. DEI has to be integrated. And that's how it can be successful. So that's the call to you, the call to action, the excitement around this. And I want to thank you for this conversation today. we have time for questions. This is my contact information. I'm on social media. I'm on LinkedIn a lot if you want to connect with me there. If you have questions after today, as you're thinking, as this percolates, feel free to reach out. We will have another roundtable coming up, which will be announced in a moment. So more conversations, but I'm going to stop here and we can take a few questions. Let me answer a few over chat and then we'll pause the recording, okay? And then we can have a nice juicy discussion. So let me take a few on chat. So the first few that have come in is thinking about unconscious bias. And I can explain also, let me explain first of all what an employee resource group is. An employee resource group is, the short form is ERG, and they're groups that are in companies that are around a certain identity demographic or community. So for example, you might have the Latinx, Latina, Hispanic employee resource group, or you could have the disability resource group, or you could have the LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, etc. group, right? The pride group. And as that group comes together, they put together events or programs or awareness campaigns about certain things. So that is something in usually larger companies, but smaller companies are doing ones around that. Thank you for that question. We had a question around unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is an issue within our processes, within everything that we do in our companies. And it can happen when we don't realize that we have bias around something. So take, for example, I went to my doctor recently. He's a man, and the front desk reception said, your normal doctor can't see you. Would you like to see another one? Sure, I'll see it. So as a woman came in and she started talking to me, I thought she was the nurse. Now, I teach about diversity, equity, inclusion all day long, but I had bias. I was expecting a man. That's unconscious. We breathe it in. It's something in the air. This can happen around, you have employees who are people of color and people mistake them for, the custodial staff, which is nothing wrong with that. But, we work with entertainment companies, and someone was saying, there was one of the talent, he happened to be Asian. He went to the catering truck and they were, he was one of the main actors, and they had steak that day. They had steak that day. He was looking forward to steak. And the catering truck said, oh, the extras are over there. He got told to go to where the extras are. He's the main talent. So that bias is in us because of society, media, whatever we've been taught to take in. And it's accidental, but it's also something we need to work on. So when we did that with that company, we had to have a big talk about that. The women who worked in props and set design, people were surprised and were like, do you need a hand with that? Or there's some women in finance and they didn't know they were in finance. They thought they were in something else. So things like that are everywhere in every industry. Thank you for these questions. These are great. Okay, let's pause the recording and we'll take a few questions. All right.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So thank you, Farzana, for presenting on this topical subject. I want to thank everyone participating for asking your questions so that others can learn, and also for your comments, very informative. Before you leave, I just want to announce Chamber's next event on diversity, equity, and inclusion will be on March 11th at 9 a.m. And, we're at a point in our history where it seems like people are increasingly ready to share their truth, both at their personal lives and at work. So this business leader roundtable panel discussion is going to be with South Bay DE&I professionals, and it'll be facilitated by Farzana. So please register for what we expect to be a very engaging dialogue. We thank the Chamber again and Torrance Refining Company for hosting this event, as well as California Water Service for their sponsorship. And I want to thank our Chamber event coordinator, Jonisha Miller, for helping to facilitate, and of course, our keynote speaker, Farzana Nayani, for presenting today. Thank you all for sharing your morning with us, and we hope you have a safe and wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.
Great program, Barbara. Thank you.
Hey, okay, Farzana left. Barbara, I'm gonna head back to the office. So if you want to message me and all that, I'll be there in about 15 minutes. So
Okay, great.
thank you.
Oh, and Tara, if you're still on, you're the winner of the book.
She's not. Oh, she is. Tara
Oh,
is.
she is, yeah. Sorry, I should have announced that earlier.
Oh, okay. I mean, we have her email.
I'm
Yay.
Yay.
Oh my goodness, hello. I'm so sorry. I was listening but working at the same time. So my apologies. I'm still lingering here.
No
But I want a
worries.
book.
You want a book?
Awesome.
So
Okay.
we'll pop that into the mail to you if that's okay. If we have your address.
Okay, with CFS Medical Supplies, 2114 Redondo Beach Boulevard. Is that what you have, or you want me to put it in the chat?
Yeah, why don't you put it in the chat? That'd be great.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's good karma right there. Good vibes. Win something, didn't even know it was a drawing or anything. How awesome is that today? Wonderful. Okay, I'm typing it now.
Barbara, I am heading off as well, but aloha to you. And it was so nice to be in contact with the Torrance Chamber. Obviously it's personal for me too, since I'm a resident. But yeah,
Of course.
would love to keep in touch. This is my last week with Farzana Nayani Consulting.
Oh,
I'll be heading. I got a new job as an HR manager in diversity recruitment.